So in my last video I showed you several methods to progress intra-exercise, which means basically getting stronger in one particular movement. In this video, however, I want to give you multiple great ways to progress inter-exercise, which means basically getting stronger in one exercise and transferring to the harder progression of that exercise, or a completely new exercise that is significantly more difficult. For example, progressing from tack plunge push-ups to advanced tack plunge push-ups, or from pull-ups to archer pull-ups. These are different progressions of one movement pattern basically. But why do you need these complex, they're not really complex, methods of progressing in order to see gains in strength? Well, strength training depends on a process called progressive overload, and it is really important to put more stress on your body than you did last time. But what will you do in case you're, for example, working with your tack front lever pull-ups and you already got really strong at them? Maybe you can even do like 10 good reps, but you're still not able to do even 3 reps of advanced tack front lever pull-ups in order to complete a full training session with that progression. In that case, you have to use specific methods of programming in order to bridge that gap between these two progressions. And this is exactly what this video is all about. However, if you need a method to get stronger in your current exercise, your current progression, and you're not even thinking about changing the progression to a more difficult one yet, then go watch my last video. It will be here or here. I hope that worked. And come back to this video once you will need it. So the first method is called weight addition. And if you do have access to weights, it is really effective at bridging that gap. For example, if you can do 8 tack plunge push-ups, but you can't do 3 advanced tack plunge push-ups, then you can start doing your sets of 8 with ankle weights. For example, like 1 kg on each foot. The numbers here must be really low, because in case of tack plunge push-ups, ankle weights will basically increase your lever and you will have to lean a bit more forward. But nevertheless, it is a really good method. So if you have access to weight, use them. And obviously you could do the same thing with isometric holds, like tack plunge isometric hold, or front lever tack isometric hold, whatever you want basically. Method 2, assistance. In case you're not strong enough to do the next progression already, you can make it easier by using assistance. For example, things like resistance bands or pulley systems. But remember that with assistance you always have to make it consistent and measurable. So on each training session you need to use exactly the same amount of assistance as you did on your last training session, so you can really measure the progress clearly. Pulley systems are an amazing tool for that, because you know exactly how much weight you're using at each set, at each rep. So again, if you have access to weights or pulley systems, then it is a great tool. I've never used it personally, but I've seen it online and it just seems like a perfect tool for progressing. Third method, eccentrics, utilizing eccentrics basically. So this way you also make the next progression easier by only doing the eccentric part of the movement, so the negative part of the movement. Also, eccentrics are amazing for practicing unilateral movements like one arm chin up or one arm pull up. A good rule of thumb is that if you can do 3 repetitions of 10-second eccentrics, controlled and nice form, then you must be able to do at least 1 concentric rep. So if you can do 3 10 seconds eccentric repetitions of one arm chin up, then you must be able to do at least 1 concentric rep of one arm chin up. Method 4, momentum and increased range of motion. Yes, you heard me right, momentum. You will be using bad form in order to complete repetitions, but there is nothing wrong with that as long as you don't cause harm to yourself and as long as you can measure and stay consistent with the same progression. An example of this might be, for example, advanced tack front lever rows pull-ups. You could do them by just hanging off of the bar, then doing a normal pull-up and transferring to that front lever position midway, and then helping yourself to reach that full pull-up, because you have some momentum from the vertical pull-up you did at the beginning. I honestly can't really find it working for me, but I've seen many people utilize that strategy with good results. And also be creative, think of some other exercises where you might use that method, and I'm sure you will have great progress with that. Okay, here is where things get a bit tricky. The fifth method is exercise modification. So let's say you can do advanced tack planche push-ups, but you're not able to start progressing with straddle planche push-ups. They are just too difficult for you. So if you think about that motion pattern, planche push-ups, in which stage it is the most difficult? Obviously, it will be the most difficult at the top, since you have to actually hold the planche position and the levers and center of gravity is higher and levers are working against you. So you could utilize that knowledge by going lower with the straddle position, and when straightening out your arms, you could go back to your advanced tack planche position. So basically you would transfer between these two positions. When you're at the bottom, you would have straddle planche, and then when you're up with straight arms, you would have advanced planche position. And this way, the whole exercise, the whole range of movement would have pretty much the same difficulty. Very similar difficulty throughout the whole range of movement. So again, if you struggle with an exercise of some sort, think if you could maybe use that knowledge that I just told you to maybe modify your exercise in some kind of way. Sixth method, hybrid sets. This is probably the best method to bridge the gap between two progressions. And how it works is you basically start by doing that harder variant, that harder progression of an exercise, for example, for even 1 or 2 reps. And then you fill out the rest of the volume you need to progress with the previous progression. And then on each next training, you just try to do more of that harder progression and less of that previous progression. Change the proportions basically until you have only the harder progression. So if you're a beginner and you really want to learn these super wide pull-ups, then you could just start doing like 1 or 2 of these wide pull-ups and then filling up the rest of the volume with regular pull-ups. And then on each training session, trying to increase that number of these wide pull-ups and maybe decrease the number of regular pull-ups if the volume would be too high and cost you to not recover properly. This method is also great because it lets you basically progress on 2 different planes. You progress with wide pull-ups and you also progress with regular pull-ups. So you get better with 2 exercises and you all the time you progress to that one harder exercise. Okay, my throat is already starting to hurt, but let's keep going. The 7th method is a very similar one to the previous, and it is basically hybrid sets but with eccentrics instead of the previous progression. So sticking to our wide pull-ups example, you would do like 2 wide pull-ups or as many as you could, and then you would fill that volume gap with eccentric wide pull-ups. So you could do like 3 sets of 1 wide pull-up or 2 wide pull-ups immediately followed by like 4 repetitions of 5-second eccentric. And this will also fill that volume gap and just guarantee that you progress with the exercise that you're working with. And then the last method, the 8th method, is simple hybrid sets. This method is hands down the best for progressing with pure strength for most people. And how it works, it basically utilizes 1 repetition sets. So if you have an exercise that is really difficult for you, I don't know, let's say muscle up. Muscle up is really difficult for you. You can only do like 1 rep. And in the 2nd rep, you already failed that. You're not able to get on the bar. So in that case, you would do like 2 to 5 sets or even 1 to 5 sets of that 1 muscle up. And then also fill in the gap with either eccentrics or the previous progression, like maybe negative muscle ups or resistant band muscle ups. You get the idea. The point here is to do a maximal possible volume with that harder progression, and you could do exactly that by doing sets of 1 repetitions. The only downside of that method is that it just takes a really fucking long amount of time to complete a whole workout, especially if you use this method with like 3 or 4 exercises, then it's just like 3 hours or more. But you know, if you're really serious, if you can't wait to make that extra gains, that extra progress, then it is a really good method for you to consider. So use these methods responsibly, plan and progress steadily. But if you feel like you're extra strong and you have like 2 reps in the tank on every set, then feel free to make a jump in your progression method, you know. You should always be close to failure. Not to failure, but you should always be close. So you can't train if the training is too easy. And remember that these progression templates were basically meant to give you an idea how progress works. So I would actually advise you to look again at these progressions, choose the ones that you most like, that will be most suited towards your needs, and then maybe combine a few different methods or create your own. Think about some ways you can make current progression harder or the next progression easier, and just play around with that. Calisthenics training and strength training should be fun. That's the point we are training, If our only goal would be to get fucking jacked and learn all the calisthenics skills, if that was our only motivation, do you think it would be really that fun? Training would be fun? No. And this is basically it. Remember that programming and progressing steadily is the most important part of strength training, so don't undervalue this video and the last I've made. And yeah, I hope you get great progress. Peace out.